David Tulis.
You know, I like to say that I'm a pro-government journalist, a very, very pro-government journalist, favoring law and order over chaos, favoring the rule of law over arbitrary and personal distinctions made by people in government and out of government against other people, right? The use of force is the thing I think we need to object to. The use of violence and compulsion, especially when there is only a pretended good, a pretended social benefit to said violence. We need to have less violence in time, as time goes on, less violence rather than more. And that is the report, I think, of humankind in general. And it's something that you can learn about the process of at a conference being held at First Presbyterian Church this week in Chattanooga that is about the sovereignty of God and the work of missions around the world. It is a remarkable thing how Christianity has its selfless interest in other people going out of their way, its members going out of their way with great trouble to translate, to create vocabularies, to create forms of writing and alphabets for tongues that are unwritten, purely oral traditions in lost parts of the world. And they create an alphabet, create a literature, thereby altering the way that many tens of thousands of people who are, you might say, lost, altering the way they think, giving them a true understanding, or at least an approximation to a true understanding of the human condition and the effects of the fall on all mankind. The news is getting better and better, and the work of grace in human society, in human culture, from the earliest empires after the flood to the empires of today, there is a general improvement in the lot of mankind. The violence of the Chaldeans and the Assyrians, for example, softened in Rome, which was though a horribly violent empire, was nonetheless relatively mild in comparison. And from the time of Solomon, the great wise one, who prayed to God to give him wisdom over riches, there were kings from all the known world came to hear him. And I think about 900 BC, and that was the beginning of monotheism around the world. The idea that there was a God external to any particular king, a law external to any particular monarch or reigning family. And that, so you can see even in pagan cultures, there are improvements in the mode of worship. It's still idolatrous, of course, from polytheism to monotheism, but there is, in examples like that, there is to be seen an improvement in mankind's lot, making the human mind more open over the centuries to the promises of Christianity, which is, of course, the leading source worldwide of the idea of grace. Every other system of thought, every other system of opinion, and every philosophy, as some secular historians will admit, these are found in Christianity. And that is what we're looking at here on the David Tulis program. How is it that if we look at local economy and free markets, we can work toward a kind of redemption, a kind of rebuilding of American culture and society here where we happen to be. Now, of course, if you're in a faraway place watching us on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio, or on Facebook at Nooga Radio, on the Nooga Radio page, or hearing our wonderful shows on the TuneIn Radio app, you can hear me anywhere in the world. In fact, if you were planning on leaving the country and want to hear Sean Hannity on our station, you may do so in Belgrade. You may do so in Leningrad on your TuneIn Radio app if you have a wireless signal. So we're all around the world, and but my concern really is here, life here in Chattanooga, and I want to make an argument that I think will be helpful to the City Council and to Mayor Andy Bereka. It is a kind of marketing, a pro-government marketing argument that I think is I thought of it this morning after having talked some with Mike Steele, our famous caller, who's a man who thinks a lot about the issues, and here it is, and I think it's something that I give this brief analysis, kind of little marketing suggestions to the city council and to Mayor Andy Bereka in a way to help them, okay, to help them, and really then to help you, because you're the one I care about most. You, my listener, here on 92.7 and 95.3 HD, the high definition channel HD4 95.3. And here it is. The Miranda warning is being ignored in Chattanooga. We know that it's bad news when it comes to the occasion of the suppression hearing. But I think the bar in Chattanooga is falling down on its law books and is supine when it should stand. Right, the bar in Chattanooga, the defense bar. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm suspecting that it's true because we're not hearing anything in the press about the Miranda rule and cases that are mentioned in the press. The reporting doesn't seem to touch on the questions about the arrest. The arrest is where often things are said by the defendant, the suspect, right, the subject, and so that is where things often are excluded because of the Miranda warning. Miranda is from Miranda versus Arizona, 1966, and it is a pro-government opinion. It is a very important pro-government opinion, pro-state opinion. It is so because in it, the high court did not seek to overturn the police state. In fact, it gave the rule that requires the Miranda warning about keeping your mouth shut because it wants the state to succeed in its enterprise of policing and law enforcement. So what the rule is, even in Chattanooga, the rule that applies from that opinion, which is copied on page 6 in the arrest procedures policy manual of the police department. The rule is that a man who is arrested by an officer has to be read his rights when he's arrested. Okay, now there's some question about what is an arrest, and the police department will have the vaguest definition in operation that can possibly be. In fact, the definition is so vague what an arrest is that even when the man's in front of the magistrate or being put into the clink, he hasn't been read his Miranda rights because he's still not under arrest, as it were, right? This is a problem for Mayor Andy Bereka, and this is a reform that Mayor Bereka needs to make before he leaves office. And that means that he needs to do it this week, right? If he's going to leave office, as the Chattanoogan.com poll suggests he should, he'll be gone by next week. So this week, his last week in office, he better give a directive to the chief, David Roddy, about Miranda. Because after all, Andy Bereka is pro-government, right? He's very pro-government. I am too. Now, well, see, Andy Bereka and I really have a lot in common. I'm pro-government, and he's pro-government too. But his understanding is, of course, I would suggest different from yours, and probably different from mine. But he should say, David Roddy, David, my chief of police, you are part of my branch, and I'm giving orders here. You need to Mirandize everybody at the moment of arrest. Now, that is a nightmare for the cop. Okay, the cops on the beat. The cop is another word for citizen on patrol. These citizens on patrol in Chattanooga, 500 strong, bearing the uniform, part of an elite, bearing in our law a title of nobility, as it were. They don't want to have to do Miranda. That's why Miranda is ignored. The public policy of Miranda that gives this department is CALEA certification, right? The CALEA, this nonprofit organization that gives standards for police departments, assumes that Miranda is being given, and so there's a problem here in certification by this private cartel of approvers in the CALEA system. They're going to want to know about Miranda, so there needs to be a reform this week. Okay, keep that department certified. Now, Miranda is pro-government in that it allows the defendant to be put on notice, and once he's been notified, everything he says, everything he gives in the way of documents or permissions for search and so on, all of that is allowable as evidence against him. So you see how Miranda is pro-government. It's pro-government in that it allows the finger pointer, the officer, finger pointer A and finger pointer B, Neil Pinkston, the district attorney, to prosecute and get all the evidence in. There won't even be an exclusion hearing. There won't even be one because the defense lawyer will tell the defendant, look, he read your Miranda rights at the first moment, so why did you blab on and on and on about your problems, right? Your situation, try to talk your way out of it. Why did you try to talk your way out of this case? And giving things away, right? And giving probable cause to search, et cetera, et cetera. Why did you do that? Right? You got Mirandized. So no, I'm not going to motion for an evidentiary hearing. And I'm not gonna propose a motion for a suppression hearing. Forget it. I'm not doing it. That's what's going to happen. And of course, if it's a PD, a public defender, the whole argument is just plead guilty, right? There's not going to be a case. Just plead guilty. That's what we're here for in the PD mill, the plea bargain mill, the public defense, the public defender's office. That's all that is. The public is a mill for gaining plea bargains. So there won't be a suppression hearing because you got your Miranda warning at the first moment, and so everything you said can and will be used against you in a court of law. Of course, Miranda it says this: everything you say can and will be used against you in court. Anything you you can stop talking anytime. You're not required to speak to us. You can have a lawyer present, and you should remain silent if you want to. All right, that's effectively what the Miranda warning is about, and it's part of policy in the manual. But so as I mentioned, the officers delay the understanding of arrest. They never, in fact, tell you you're under arrest until they clink the cuffs on you, and even then they don't Mirandize you. They just forgot. They just forgot, right? They're not pro-government enough to remember to Mirandize the subject. That is to say, you. And so things are getting away from the department, and prosecutions are muddied and mixed without the Miranda warning clearly being given. But to have Mayor Bereka tell David Roddy to order an obedience to the rules and an obedience to this Miranda versus Arizona opinion will make it a nightmare for the officer. Think about it. Just think how uncomfortable the officer is going to be now that when he stops a woman in a van, she's got children in the back. He's pulled her over across the bridge on Highway 27 into town. And the first thing he does to her is, ma'am, I'm here to let you know that you're under arrest. You have been, anything you say can will be used against you. So think how terrifying that's going to be. Rightly so. So she should say nothing. Her husband should have told her, look, don't say anything, don't give anything, just face arrest or sign the citation. And by the way, a citation doesn't require anything but a name and address. That's all that's required in the statute to have a citation filled out to avoid arrest. Right? You can avoid arrest by signing the citation, and you have to give name and address. I said earlier date of birth, but that's not in the statute. So so the Miranda rule is odious to the officer who now has to effectively tell people that they're under arrest rather than just let them not realize it, right? Because it's easier to not let them realize it and just to chit chat and kind of let them give things away, so that in that conversation the officer can now have probable cause. He may not have had it initially. He may not have had articulable suspicion initially, but now he has it because the person is chatting, trying to argue his way to show how nice he is and how harmless he is and how good he is and how respectful and obedient he is to the law and how non-criminal he is. All of that, of course, feeding the officer who's looking for the reason for a real arrest, right? To firm up his suspicions that this person, this mom with her children in the back of the van, she's really a malefactor. We need to teach her a lesson. And so that the idea, what would happen is this. What would happen if Mayor Bereka and David Roddy honor the rule in Chattanooga, and if other chiefs of police and their mayors honor the rule in the Chattanooga area and elsewhere, would be fewer stops, fewer flashing of the blue lights. That is to say, more grace and less threat, more respect of the citizen, the innocent citizen, less interference, less interposition by the state as against the people. And that's what we call grace, right? That is what we call an improvement in the human condition. And you think that things are not improving. Well, let me just tell you that around the world, things are getting better. Now, I know we've got surveillance rules coming before the Congress. We have totalitarian measures afloat that touch on assets, that touch on Bitcoin, that touch on other desires by the national state using its FISA courts and other mechanisms to harass and intimidate and lawlessly snoop on and snipe on the people. I know there are those, but in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there's a story that says that war itself is evaporating. And we know that the missionary work of the First Presbyterian Church sponsored missionaries who received in this year $785,972 in gifts, right? The whole list of missionaries around the world, including Reformed University Fellowship at UT Knoxville campus, have received that much, $785,972 in tithe money and gifts. Again, what's going on here? Well, they're pushing out the idea of the Lord Jesus Christ, and they're pushing out the idea of grace over force, of consent over compulsion, forgiveness over execution, right? Discussion over threat. The military, this is so funny. The federal military is considering a new approach to shifting battlefields. And it says effectively that war is outdated. And this is something long in the making, and it's not a new point. These points were really first uncovered by Martin Van Creveld in his book 1990s Transformation of War, which I finally read last year. I mean, I'm 15 years out of date, but I finally read that book and some of his others as well that talk about the transformation of war and the decline of the state. The state is declining, and we need to understand that is going to be a blessing to all, because after all, in the 20th century alone, governments have destroyed 260 million people. 260 million people. And Matt Agarist, writing about a Mother Jones report, tells us that police killings are police killings are part of progressivism, right? Police killings are part of the progressive argument. And last year there were, well, I'm going to have to look at this again to give the succinct summary of what Matt's report about Mother Jones is. But there are maybe 30 times more. You're 30 times more likely to be killed by an officer than victim of either terrorism or crime. But the story about the military that I want to mention to you just before I have some important announcements about our sponsors here is this. Again, showing that peace is coming across humankind, and it's thanks to the gospel message as proposed by missionaries, even the weakest missionaries in the lot, even those who have no conception of God's claim on societies in general, but merely personal, the personal human being. Even those missionaries supported by that particular church, even they are conveying the argument for peace, right? For peace and forgiveness and repentance over threat, compulsion, coercion, and totalitarianism. The Army is preparing to unveil a new approach to fighting wars that combines space, cyberspace, and traditional combat. Major General Bo Dias says that this is called hybrid warfare, a multi-domain battle combining cyber attacks and social media exploitation with special forces and conventional military units. The Army's new warfighting concept seeks to narrow the gap between what's been going on and the new digital environment. So you see, what's happening is warfare is shifting from shooting bullets to shooting pluses and minuses online. That's seems to be what's happening, where war is an impotent effect on infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and there are not actually people lying dead with bullets in their gut, writhing in agony, calling for the medic. That is something that will, of course, continue happening because of the fall and the effects of the fall until the last day, right? We'll have that until the last day, but there's a softening of war. Martin Van Creveld has pointed that out, and he even Van Creveld says that war is obsolete. A remarkable analysis. Even though we have troops in Niger, and we had a report last week of some being killed in a confrontation. The concept paper slated for release at the beginning of the Army's week-long professional gathering in Washington should change the military's thinking about when and how an Army fights, what tools it uses, and how it can best counter adversaries, says General Dias. While the concept applies only to the Army, other branches have been part of the discussion and could sign on as the concept moves to become established doctrine. The doctrine identifies one key threat of a hybrid attack, that an adversary can effectively occupy territory before the U.S. or its allies have time to react, which means the U.S. needs to be able to launch offensive operation before the shooting war begins. So you see, the war begins before bullets are fired. Now, you might think that sounds really bad, but on the other hand, it sounds like, that you've had the prospect of digital interfaces replacing dropping of napalm and the firing of APDS rounds from a Warthog jet into a bunker. before a shooting war begins, the concept paper said, which can be seen as effectively preempting armed strikes. So in other words, right before an armed strike or instead of an armed strike, we have the digits flying at each other, and we're gonna take down somebody's computer system. And that's it. Okay, we're satisfied that we've won the battle, military and non-military aggression. So it seems that war itself is being slowly dissolved before our eyes, and this story suggests that. So what does that say for Andy Bereka? Well, I think Andy Bereka and David Roddy need to crack down on the Miranda sloppiness among the ranks. Sloppy people need to be warned, and confrontations need to be reduced. This is David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3.